The longest, hardest name in all of the world belongs to a small Welsh town in Europe. And this is how it's spelled. LLGWYNDROBWLLGWYRNDROBWLLANTYSLIOGOGOGOCH. And this is what the town looks like. This is the name. It's a real town. And here is a weatherman who's going to pronounce it for you. Watch this.
Now today we had a big contrast in temperature across the UK, just 12 degrees over coastal parts of eastern England with cloudy skies, but in the sunshine in northwest Wales at RAF Mona, just up the road from Llanfair Pwllgwyn, Gellgogedacwyn Llantysilio, the temperature got to 21 Celsius, that's 70 in Fahrenheit.
All right, wait. I'm almost there. Do it. Play it one more time. I think I can get there.
Now today we had a big contrast in temperature across the UK, just 12 degrees over coastal parts of eastern England with cloudy skies, but in the sunshine in northwest Wales at RAF Mona, just up the road from Llanfair Pwllgwyn, Gellgogedacwyn Llantysilio, the temperature got to 21 Celsius, that's 70 in Fahrenheit.
All you need to know is that's exactly how I would have pronounced it. If there was ever a town that needed a new name in this world, that town needs a new name. We're in a series that we've titled No Perfect People, and it's several facets of a series because part of it is looking at how God worked through imperfect people of the past, and that's our hope that he will work through us, and he will. He changes the world through imperfect people. But we've also unpacked something else. When God meets some of these imperfect people, once in a while, he changes their name. And in Bible times, names were very significant, very important. They identified the person. And so if God changed your name, it meant he was moving you to a new purpose. He was moving you to a new identity. He wanted you to leave that old life and get on with something new for yourself. And I love some of the name changes that he goes through, and that's what this series is all about. But if you just get caught up on the name change, you're going to miss the point of the story. There's something God is doing huge behind the name change aspect. Today we're going to look at the life of Jacob. Jacob was a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of nature. He had his good moments, but boy, he had his really, really bad moments too. And for all of our newcomers who you're interested in investigating Christianity, you might not know the story well. Let me just recap real quick. Jacob is the grandson of Abraham in the book of Genesis. He's the son of Isaac, and he comes along, and when he's born as a twin. All right? He's actually the second born. His older brother Esau, he's born first, and Esau is described as red hair and very, very hairy, all right? And he'll spend his whole life just this really, really hairy dude. But when Jacob comes out behind, when Jacob is born behind Esau, he's holding his brother's heel. He's a heel grabber. It's as if he's trying to latch on to what he has and he wants it, all right? And so, Esau, and then just, like that there. That was never mind. I wish we wouldn't have done that. But anyway, so this is Jacob's, so the parents name him Jacob. Jacob, the name Jacob has a lot of different meanings, but what it means to them is to supplant, a supplanter. Supplanter means that he will spend a lot of his childhood trying to supplant his brother's authority, trying to put himself in his brother's place. Jacob wishes he was the firstborn. Oh my goodness. And he does some really underhanded things. He's deceptive, he's crafty, and that's what the name Jacob, it's all of that. It means con man, deceiver. It's all lumped into that name of Jacob. Well, as Jacob grows up, he wants his brother's blessing. And in Bible times, the blessing being passed from a father to the oldest son was a really big deal. And so, because Esau is a hunter as an adult, Isaac, who's almost blind at this point, he might as well be legally blind. He can't see clearly. Isaac tells his older son Esau, go kill an animal, prepare it, come in, we'll eat together, and I will give you the family blessing. So Esau goes off to hunt. Rebekah, his wife, Isaac's wife, does the most unthinkable thing a wife or a mom can do. She goes to Jacob and she says, your brother is about to get the family blessing. This is your chance. And she helps her son to kill a goat, prepare the meat, and then they take the skin of the goat and they put it on Jacob's arm so he can fool his dad. You know, this coarse goat hair on his arm, and which tells you how grotesque Esau was. But anyway, so now the tent door opens and in comes Jacob, and he says, I'm here for the family blessing, Father. And right away, Isaac can tell it. Well, you look and you smell and you feel like my son Esau, but you sound like Jacob. And he asked him this question, what is your name? And Jacob answers, my name is Esau. Now, that'll be really important in today's story, that question. What is your name? Well, he deceives his dad. He gets the blessing. When Esau comes back, his anger explodes. He tells his brother, the minute Dad is dead, I'm killing you. Well, Jacob becomes a guy who runs away. From this moment on, anytime there's big problems, anytime there's anything he can't handle, he just runs away. And this becomes part of his nature. He runs to this area. There's a family member there named Laban. He meets Laban. He starts working for Laban. He agrees, I'll work for you for 7 years if you give me one of your daughters as a wife, and I want Rachel. She's not the firstborn. She's a secondborn, but he goes, I want her. And so Laban agrees. He works for 7 years. And at the end of 7 years, on their wedding night, Laban flips the deceptive table on Jacob because he doesn't give him the bride that he had been working for 7 years. He gives him the older daughter. And he gives her to him at night and in a tent. He doesn't know it until the next morning. Now Jacob's upset because he's been deceived. You've been a deceiver all your life. What? Now you're mad that it comes back on you. Yeah. And he works another 7 years to get the bride of his dreams. Through this whole time, when Jacob showed up at Laban's family, he had nothing but the shirt on his back. But God is blessing Jacob. And Jacob's livestock starts just booming. His herds just start booming. His wealth just starts climbing out. And all of a sudden, Laban, his father-in-law, becomes very angry and very jealous of his son-in-law because he is wealthy beyond means. And it's in this moment that, guess what Jacob does? He runs away again. You know, this is too much to handle. He grabs his 2 wives. He also has 2 concubines that he's had children with. Altogether, he has 12 sons. He's got all this possessions, all this wealth, and he takes off running in the middle of the night. Now Jacob is standing at a river. Behind him is Laban, his father-in-law, and he's very angry. In front of him is Esau, the brother that threatened to kill him. And what is Jacob going to do now? And there's this moment of deep interpersonal wrestling, but there's also a physical wrestling match. And he's going to wrestle with God himself. Are you ready? We're in Genesis 32, starting with verse 22. That night Jacob got up and he took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his sons, and he crossed the ford of Jabbok. All right, the ford means a shallow place where you can wade through. All right, that's what a river ford is. And after he sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left all alone. And a man wrestled with him till daybreak. In other words, Jacob wrestles with this guy all night long. Now, who is the man? This has been the cause of all kinds of debates. Is it just a man like it says? Is it an angel? Is it maybe Jesus? Is it God himself? I believe it's God, and I'm going to tell you why. More than one place in the Bible, it tells us it was God who he wrestled with. The name of this river and the name of this area and what God is doing in Jacob's life is all identified with God. God somehow takes on the figure of a man, and he comes down and he wrestles with Jacob. He has supernatural powers. We're going to see that in a moment. And so I'm not going to get caught up in with some debate with anyone here today. In my mind, the Bible tells me it's God, therefore I'm just going to accept that it was God. Some people believe, by the way, this is a metaphor of what he was struggling with inside. I think the wording and the story is way too direct to get into that. I think this is a physical wrestling match. Look at verse 25. When the man saw that he could not overpower him. That is not the best translation. The better translation would be when they hit a stalemate. In other words, don't think that God can't overpower Jacob. He'll prove that in a moment that he can. But it means that when God saw that he wasn't getting anywhere. I wrestled with you all night long and you still haven't surrendered to me? He touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. In other words, with just a touch, that hip went right out of that socket. Now, there's got to be pain. There's got to be discomfort. There's something there that's physically now going to keep him from running in the future, by the way. The man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." In other words, God is saying, how much longer are you going to do this? We've been at this all night long. You still haven't surrendered to me. But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Jacob still isn't surrendering after everything that happened to him, after wrestling with God all night long, after having his health touched. Nothing. He's still not ready to give in. One of my childhood memories from Christmas time is that my mom would pull out this nutcracker bowl. It looked like it had been hollowed out by a tree because it still had bark around the edge of the bowl, and then it had these nutcracker tools in the middle with picks and stuff. And then she'd fill it with these nuts. And when my dad would come home, I wasn't interested in eating those nuts. I was interested in playing with that nutcracker. So I'd ask my, hey, you want some nuts? Yeah. And so, man, I'd try to crack those nuts. And now, here's something you need to know. The nuts, sometimes the outer surface can be really, really hard over other ones. And there were times my little hands could not crack that thing. And my dad would say, "Here, give it to me." And his big, strong hand, he'd just crush it. And Jacob is going to be a hard nut to crack. He will not give in to God here. The reason that this becomes really important more than the name change is because there's a whole bunch of Jacobs with us today. And if I'm transparent with you, there are times I've had my own Jacob moments where I just wrestled with God. Jacob has not only been wrestling with God, he's been wrestling with who he is. He didn't like being second born. He's been wrestling with his brother. He's been wrestling with his parents. He's been wrestling with his in-laws. But out of all the wrestling he's been doing, he's been in a wrestling match with God. And I just know there are some people here who are listening to this right now, and you have been in a wrestling match with God for too long. Verse 27. The man asked him, "What is your name?" Now remember what I told you? His dad asked him that, and he said, "My name is Esau," because that's the secret little desire. He didn't want to be who he was. And sometimes we waste so much of our time, so much of our life wishing we were someone else. What will he answer? And sure enough, he says, "My name is Jacob." This is a moment of him sharing his heart. I'm the deceiver. I'm the heel grabber. I'm the supplanter. That's what he's finally opening up to who he really is. Then the man said, No. Your name will no longer be Jacob. Your new name is Israel, because you have struggled with God and humans, and you have overcome. Wow. To be given the name Israel. Israel means struggles with God, but it also means governed by God. I struggled with God, but now I'm governed by God. That's what the name Israel means. And you know that to this day there is the nation of Israel. They wear the name Israel going all the way back to this story right here. This name change is significant. It is important, but there's something else going on here. It's the one who struggles with God and then decides, am I going to let God govern me or not? Preachers usually love to beat up Jacob. They love to pick on him for all the deception. I like him, and I like him because he came from a jacked up family. He comes from all kinds of dysfunctional aspects. His grandfather, Abraham, was deceptive. His dad, Isaac, was deceptive. His mother and father have fallen in this trap of playing favorites. Isaac favored Esau, the firstborn. Rebekah favored Jacob. He was more fair-skinned and hung around the tents more. And they played favorites. And I've said this before, but it's worth pointing out again. You know, for parents and for grandparents, do not get into the trap of favoritism with children. You could leave a scar that could follow them for years. There's people here today. You feel like you were not the favored one in the home. And God a long time ago showed how that kind of thing can impact a family. Jacob didn't learn his own lesson because he'll go on and favor Joseph over everyone. But it's not about the favoritism, and it's not about the running away, and it's not so much about the name change. This whole story is in the Bible to challenge you and I and to ask this question. Have you surrendered to God? Because here's the big point. Every time I get to this chapter when I'm reading through the Bible, I find it one of the more challenging chapters of the Bible for this. It teaches us God wants to conquer you. He will wrestle with you all night long because he's determined to conquer us. And it begs the question, have I completely surrendered to him? Have I had my Garden of Gethsemane moment where Jesus is praying to the Father and he says, I don't want to go to the cross, but not my will be done, your will be done. Some of you have been asked to face some horrible things in this life. And God is waiting for the prayer where you say, it's not my will, but your will be done. My brother, I'm the oldest, and then my younger brother, he and I used to wrestle a lot. I remember when we stopped, I came home from college, and I started picking on him and teasing him, and he had spent that whole time I was at college, he had been working out, he'd grown 2 inches taller than me, and like in a flash, in a second, he had me picked up, turned sideways, and pinned against the wall. and I was shocked, and I looked at him and I said, say uncle. And my dad laughed so hard. Oh, your days of wrestling your brother are over. And they were. I didn't pick another fight after that, but I had a closeness with my brother. At age 36, I would have been 38. My brother was 36, 20 years ago. He was diagnosed with an inoperable cancerous brain tumor. And we were told we'd have about 6 months with him. And he only made it 6 weeks. Happened real fast, from diagnosis till his passing. I got a phone call. I was living in Michigan at the time. You better come home. Your brother's not going to make it through the night. And at 9 o'clock at night, I jumped in the car and took off for a 4-hour drive. And I got there just 10 minutes after my brother died. My dear little aunts, I love my aunts, but they were so torn up by, I can't believe you didn't get back here in time. Oh my goodness, that's so sad you didn't have last words with your brother. And, they just went on. And finally, after I'd heard enough, I stood before my family and I said, I trust God more than I trust what I would have said. Now, that was totally the right response. Boy, was that the right response. They still talk about that response to this day. That was my outward response. I can't honestly tell you that's what I felt inside. I watched my parents go through a funeral of a child. That's hard. And that was their second time. Some of you have heard this story, but some of you haven't. I had a baby sister that was born right after me. She passed away at 6 weeks, and now here's my brother. He passes away at 6 weeks at age 36 without a lot of time. And so my parents stood by the grave of 2 children. And my mom, you know, she was trying to be strong. But it was my dad who had such a deep impact on me. There in the cemetery, I watched my dad, who is a man of faith, by the way, a Sunday school teacher. There he stood with a grown son in a grave here and a baby here. And I watched my dad. My dad said these words, "God can be hard to trust sometimes." And I remember turning, is this wavering in faith? Is this moment when the weakness is going to be too much? Is this his moment of telling God, you've gone too far? Is this his moment where he walks away from God? I was a little nervous at a moment. And then he looked up at me, and with, you know, eyes full of tears, he just said, "But what else do I have?" And he walked out of the cemetery. He walked back into church. He walked back into worshiping God. He walked back into his Sunday school class, teaching people that God could be trusted. And so it was 2 weeks after all of that, and I found myself in the woods. And I decided, I was all by myself, and I decided God and I are going to have it out. And I went at him hard. What are you doing? What was that all about? Why would you do that to such a young man? Why would you do that? He had a young wife. He had a 2-year-old daughter, my niece. Why would you do that to that little girl? Why would you do that to my parents? You've done it once before. Why would you do it this time? And man, I just let loose. And then, now just give me some freedom here. I heard God speak. Granted, it wasn't an audible voice. I'm honest about that. It wasn't audible, but boy, deep inside my heart, I heard the pounding of words, and I knew exactly what it was. God asked, "Do you trust me?" You know, really, you're going to ask me that now? And it happened again, and it happened a third time. And somewhere out there in the woods was my moment of surrender. I'm going to trust you. What else do I have? Yes, I trust you. Some of you have not had that moment yet. God is coming at you. I mean, he's coming at you. He will not walk away from you. He will not give up on you. He is determined to conquer you, and he is determined to have you trust him and surrender to him. And you come in, and as long as things are good in your life, you're all about trusting God. But the minute things get bad, then all of a sudden you want to pull your trust back. And that's not how this game is going to be played. You're going to make up your mind. Do you trust God or don't you trust him? What went on to happen to Jacob after this wrestling match all night with God, and God changes his name and changes his nature? He doesn't go back to Laban. He moves forward toward the brother who said he was going to kill him. He starts moving toward Esau. Now, granted, if you read the story today, he sends 3 caravans up ahead of him with gifts for Esau, trying to soften his heart a little bit, and I understand that. But now all of a sudden, it's just Jacob and Esau. Jacob looks up, and there's big, old, hairy Esau coming at him. And Jacob bows 7 times. 7 times he bows before his brother. And then all of a sudden, Esau just takes off in this run toward Jacob. He runs up, he punches him and kills him on the spot. No, I just made that part up. Just relax. You're all like, oh, yeah. He did what? No, he didn't. He runs up. He grabs his brother Jacob. He falls on his shoulder. He embraces him, and he starts kissing him. Kissing his brother, who cheated him out of his birthright. You've heard that part of the story before, haven't you? But it happened when Jesus was telling the story of the prodigal son, remember? Prodigal son runs away from the father. He finally gets control of himself, decides to surrender. He starts coming back to the father. The Holy Father sees his son way off and runs to him. It's a picture of God and you and I. We're the prodigal, and God is the Father. He grabs his long robe. He hikes it up. He starts running full blast at us. Before we could even come all the way back, he's running toward us. And then he grabs us, he embraces us, and he kisses us. That's exactly what Esau does. These stories are beautiful. Jacob's name would go on to be mentioned in half the books of the Bible. Jacob's name would go on to be mentioned in all 4 of the gospel accounts of Jesus Christ. 22 times, God, when he is identifying himself, 22 times he will say, I am the God of Jacob, the supplanter, the deceiver, the heel grabber. You remember Jacob? I am his God. God wants to be your God too. How long are you going to keep going on wrestling with him? How long are you going to go before you surrender completely to him and say, you know what, it's not my will, it's your will be done in my life? There might be some painful moments. There might be some hard doctor reports to receive. There might be moments of standing by a grave that you don't want to stand by. But how much longer before you finally give in and stop the wrestling and say, God, you are my God, and I'm going to trust you? Today might just be that day.